There's something that's hard to explain to people because it doesn't sound like a real problem when you say it out loud. Everything is fine, nothing is actually wrong. But something feels off, not broken, not fallen apart, just slightly not right. Like a picture frame that's almost level. Most people wouldn't notice, but you do. And you can't stop noticing it once you notice it. If this feels familiar, stay with me. It's not a feeling you can point to. That's what makes it hard. If something specific was wrong, you could work with that. You could name it, address it, and move on. And this feeling doesn't have a location. It's not about one thing. It's more like a quality of the day, a texture underneath everything. And because it's not specific, it's easy to dismiss. I'm fine. Nothing's wrong. No, I'm good. But the feeling doesn't go away just because you can't explain it. You start looking for the source. The natural response is to investigate, to find the thing that's causing it. Because as people, we are curious. Because if you can't find it, you can't fix it. So I start scanning. Is it this relationship, this situation, this decision I made? Am I tired? Am I stressed? Did something happen? And sometimes I find something, but a lot of the time I don't. And that's more unsettling than anything. Because if nothing caused it, how do you make it stop? I remember a day that was, by any reasonable measure, a good day. Nothing went wrong. Had a decent conversation, got some things done. The weather was nice. And I remember thinking, okay, this should feel good. But underneath it all, something just felt slightly off. And I kept waiting for it to lift. You know, like fog lifting. Kept thinking the next thing would reset it. But it didn't. And by the end of the day, I was more confused than when it started. Not upset, not sad, just slightly out of sync with my own life. You might have had a day like that too, where everything worked, but you still couldn't quite land in it. The feeling isn't random, it's information. Here's what I've started to think. That off feeling isn't a malfunction. It's not your brain being broken or dramatic. It's more like a signal, a quiet one, telling you that something underneath the surface isn't quite matching up. Not a crisis, not an emergency, just a gap between how you're moving through your life and how you actually experience things inside. And feelings like this are easy to push past until they're not. The gap between outer and inner, here's where it gets specific. The off feeling often comes from a kind of split, where the outside of your life looks one way and the inside, it feels another. Maybe things look okay, stable, functioning, moving, but something in you isn't quite settled in. Like you're running a version of your life that's slightly out of sync with who you actually are right now. Not dramatically, just enough to to feel it quietly, persistently, like wearing a shoe that's almost the right size. What if the feeling is accurate? Most of the time, we treat this feeling like a problem, something to resolve, something to push through. But what if it's not a problem? What if it's just accurate? What if something in you is noticing a misalignment that your conscious mind hasn't caught up yet? Because we change slowly, without announcements. And sometimes the life you're living hasn't quite caught up to who you've become. And that gap, that slight offness, might just be the space between who you were and who you're becoming. Not broken, just in between. I went through a stretch where I kept trying to fix the feeling by changing things, rearranging my schedule, change my routine, tried a different way of structuring the day. And each time, it would feel a little better for a bit, then the feeling would come back. And I'd think, okay, I just haven't found the right arrangement yet. But eventually, I started wondering if the problem wasn't the arrangement. Maybe it wasn't what I was doing. Maybe it was something more underneath that, something I couldn't rearrange my way out of. You might have done this too, kept adjusting the outside, hoping it would fix something on the inside. Fixing the outside doesn't always reach the inside. That's the thing about this feeling. It doesn't respond to surface level changes. You can reorganize your day, switch jobs, move apartments, change your habits. And sometimes those things genuinely help. But sometimes the feeling follows you because it was never really about the outside. It was about the gap. And the gap doesn't close by rearranging things. It closes slowly, usually by paying attention to it rather than trying to eliminate it. There was a moment, not dramatic, where the feeling suddenly, it made sense. I was doing something I'd done 100 times, something that used to feel normal. And I realized this doesn't feel like me anymore. Not in a big way, not obviously, just it didn't quite fit. And instead of trying to push past this feeling, I sat with it for a second. And something shifted, not fixed, not resolved, but I understood it differently. The feeling wasn't telling me something was wrong with me. It was telling me I had changed and hadn't noticed yet. You might have had a moment like that where the off feeling wasn't a warning. It was just the truth. Maybe this feeling, this persistent, quiet offness isn't behind you. It's not a sign you're falling apart. Maybe it's ahead of you, pointing at something you haven't fully seen yet, a version of your life that fits a little better, a way of being that's slightly more honest. And the feeling is just the gap between here and there. Not comfortable, but not wrong either. Just real. I still feel this sometimes, that slight offness underneath a perfectly fine day. And I don't always know what it means, but I've started treating it differently. Not as something to fix, not as evidence that something's wrong, more like a compass. One that doesn't always point somewhere obvious, but it's pointing at something. And maybe that's enough for now, to notice it and not run from it. I'm Scott Stewart, and you're not crazy.